everybody. Welcome to Ask an Expert. I am joined once again by the wonderful Jon Holling, and we are once again talking conditioning. We're officially calling this a series. Jon has done 2 recent conditioning Ask an Experts with us. Those were about gearing up for the season at all of the various eventing levels. And he kind of, got himself into this because he mentioned that things shift when you're more in maintenance mode during the season. And of course, Facebook went wild. So we got a lot of feedback from people that it would be super helpful to go beyond that initial gearing up period and talk about what maintenance during the season looks like. And we're so lucky that Jon has agreed to do this again. It is, right before we got on here, I was like, let's go. You know the drill, because we're doing this so frequently with him, which is such a gift. So Jon, we're just very appreciative, and we'll never stop being appreciative that you are lending your time and expertise to teach us about this and all the other things you teach us about.
Well, I'm appreciative to be here, and I'm hoping my internet holds out, because it just paused on me once and it's been a little sketchy lately. So I apologize ahead of time if there's any disruptions as we go.
Yes, you did mention that the weather there has been a little bit spotty today, which definitely does affect service. And in that case, I will be forced to do a monologue on, I don't know what topic yet, but
you got the charts. You can just take over.
Right. I'm hoping as much as you are that you stick with us, but we will roll with it however it goes. And I'll kind of hand it over to you to start and just describe kind of, we've already gone over one part of conditioning, describe this topic at large. And then once again, you have very kindly made schedules for us that we'll take a look at the 3 lower levels. Intro, beginner, novice, and novice are the 3 that we'll kind of focus on today. But if you're listening or watching live and you have questions about other levels, please feel free to put those in the chat and we will talk about those too.
Yeah, cool. All right. So I think the main thing here is to know that having these schedules is kind of like walking a distance on cross country. It's super important to have it laid out, but then you got to just go out and make it happen. And sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes when you're out on course, you get a bad distance on the way in and you got to make it work on the way out. And it's kind of the same thing with the schedules here. They're laid out. They're very systematic. And that makes you feel really good when you're starting out the season. And then you're going to have to be able to pivot and change things and adapt and be flexible. So just keep that in mind as we go through this. And we will kind of start at the intro level. And as you probably saw from the first 2 sessions, or whatever we're calling these, the first 2 of these programs, they're very similar. Just the kind of the numbers, the lengths of trots, the lengths of canters change, but really it's a 6-day-a-week schedule. We've talked about how if you can't get 6 days a week, you might be able to be a little flexible on that at some of the lower level stuff. You might have to be creative with getting those horses ridden by some other people who can help you out as you go up the levels. But it's kind of a intentionally set program that then we can adjust as we go up the levels. So when we talk about, gosh, we get done today at novice, what do I do at training level? What do I do at modified and preliminary? We can, if we get into that today, great. If we don't, we can always have another one of these, I suppose, if Jessa and Kinsey will let me. But the real answer is, if you pay attention to what we've done so far, you also can probably kind of work that out a little bit on your own if you had to, because it's a system, right?
Totally. As I was looking at these schedules that you sent over, even I could probably figure out where to go from here after looking at these 3. So let's start. If you're watching the video, I've now pulled up it's 6 weeks, which 6 weeks this time is kind of arbitrary because we're talking maintenance. But it's a 6-week schedule, just like what you saw before. If you're just listening to this in the app, these are linked within the episode description so that you can open them up and take a look. You can print them out and adjust them as you need. But Jon, you can kind of take it from here and talk us through this first intro level schedule.
Yeah, so this is the intro level. And I think the first thing to know here is in order to get to week 1 on this schedule, you should have already done 6 weeks of the first schedule in theory, right? And as we talked about in that first session, to get to that week 1 of that first 6 weeks, your horse should have been in light work. So we aren't talking about coming from a field to an event in 6 weeks or 7 weeks in this case. We're talking about coming from sort of light, sort of maintenance work, having fun, playing with your horse, to getting it ready to go to an event. So when you look at this, if you want to sort of think, okay, how do I get to that first week? Just go back and look at what we did earlier in the intro to get you sort of ready for an event. So we're talking now about week 1. And like I did in the last one, I gave Monday as an off day. That tends to be what a lot of people choose. I personally usually try to give Sundays if I'm not at an event, because that's when my football team plays. But it doesn't really matter what that day is. So as we go through here, like I said, the schedule kind of follows a program. So that first day we do hack. And I think I said hack or a light flat in here, but really what I meant was hack with a light flat. So anywhere in there you see that it says hack or light flat, what I meant to say was hack. So take your horse out for a 30 to 40 minute walk, and then somewhere within there do maybe 20 minutes of stretching, a little bit of work. The next day, because this is the week of the event, ideally I trot 1 day a week. But if you have a horse that you know is going to benefit from an extra dressage school, then you can skip that trot for that competition week and you can do flat work. I will caution you to say, if you're an intense person, which I'm not saying you are, but you might be, if you're wanting a schedule like this, you probably are. So if you do that hack and light flat, but you're being honest with yourself and you make it into a proper dressage school with a little bit of a hack, then you might want to seriously think about the Wednesday just being a trot day to take some pressure off of your horse. Because a lot of times we think if we school, they're going to be better. But actually, for their mind, that trot set is a big help. And keep in mind, like we talked about before, that trot set, yes, it's a 12-minute trot, but you've preceded that with probably a 20-minute walk, and you followed it with probably another 20 to 30-minute walk. So that's a full work. I do that trot straight through 12 minutes. Thursday is going to be our jump day. Friday is another proper dressage day. I usually will run through the test a little bit there, or at least parts of it. I will say, I personally don't find that horses memorize tests near as much as people think horses memorize tests. So I like to run through them. If you're doing your job and you're not anticipating, then usually your horse won't, but work that out with your dressage coach. And then Saturday and Sunday are your event. I can already hear the questions. What about traveling to the event? So I have set this up as if you're going to a local event. If you have to drive half a day, like this weekend, I'm going up to Atlanta. So we're going to leave Friday morning.
The dreaded pause has hit us. We'll see if he's quick to come back. If you're watching, he has frozen in a pretty funny frame, which is entertaining at least. One thing that I will say until Jon arrives back is 2 things. The first 2 Ask an Expert episodes that we did on this conditioning topic with Jon, I wasn't sure whether those would be, repetitive to one another, because the first one was gearing up for lower level events. That's intro, beginner, novice, and novice. And the second one was gearing up for higher level events, training, modified, and preliminary. And my thought was, potentially, if you listen to the one that's suitable for your level, you'll get everything that you need. Interestingly, there were so many nuggets just about conditioning in both of those sessions. So if you haven't listened to both, they are not too repetitive. You definitely could, and I think would benefit from listening to both of those, especially if you have some drive time. And in those sessions, we heard from people, those were 6 weeks of conditioning, but they didn't have the event listed on the schedule. So basically that seventh week on the bottom there wasn't shown, but that would be where your event is. And now it's very interesting to see, like, this schedule that Jon's walking us through starts the week of an event. So it kind of answers those questions of what next. You can pair those together. How am I doing, Jon? He's back, by the way. Maybe. He's back. I can see him. I can't hear him yet.
Can
I can kind of hear you. Oh,
God,
you're moving. Not quite yet.
Oh my God.
I will let you. Oh? Are you doing Wi-Fi or cell service?
I'm going to cell.
Okay.
1 sec.
A true professional rolling with, just like at the beginning when Jon said you walk your distance, but you don't really know what you're going to get. You have to adjust as you go. That's what Jon's doing.
How's this?
Incredible. The commitment is really.
Is this any better?
My favorite part. I can hear you.
Pretty high tech here.
And the lighting is great too. For those of you listening, I'm not sure if we'll cut this or not, but if you're listening, Jon is literally trekking across the farm now with his cell phone so that he can. You're looking very clear now.
Okay, I am now on one of my client's Starlinks, so I think this will work. I'm just gonna sit on the grass and go over. Where are we?
Where did we leave off? We were just hearing that you have a show in Atlanta this week, and so now you're going to talk to us about kind of what to do if there's some travel time involved.
Got it. Okay. So I apologize. I'm going to try to keep myself centered in the camera as well, so this doesn't look terrible. What I was saying was, like, we're going to ship up Friday morning. That'll get us there around 11 o'clock. We'll get settled in, give the horses a couple hours to recover. That's a 6-hour drive. And then we'll give them a light, flat school, make sure everything's where we need it to be Friday evening. If you have a longer drive, you may have to say, all right, Monday is not my day off. And my day off instead is going to be Wednesday or Thursday, whatever it needs to be, because that's my travel day. So you may have to turn that travel day into your off day for your horse as well, is what I was going to get to there.
Got it. So that takes us through week 1 when you have your event that weekend.
Right. Okay. So then after your event's over, you're going to give them that Monday. We're going to say that's a Sunday is the final part of your event. You're going to give them that Monday off. I like to then, on their first day back to work, which we'll say is Tuesday here, give them just that day of hacking, hanging out, walking around the property. Then that Wednesday becomes your hack day with your light flat work, right? So you basically have 2 pretty light days, which I think if you've had a hard enough weekend, that's makes sense. Then Thursday, I usually give them a little trot. Then Friday can be a bit optional. I don't always jump the week after an event. If I do, it's going to be something very specific. It's going to be some gymnastics, kind of working like if I thought I had this issue or that issue at the event, kind of touch up on some stuff, but you don't want that week after to be an intense week. You want it to be kind of a recovery week for your horse. Then Saturday, I would do some dressage again. And then that Sunday, because we're talking about intro, I don't think we have to be on a 5-day-a-week gallop schedule. So that Sunday is going to be our fitness day again, but that's going to be either a 2 by 2.5 minute canter. And we talked about that before. So that means you're going to give them a break in between the canters. You're going to go out, you're going to do a 12-minute trot. You're going to walk for 2 minutes. You're going to do a 2.5 minute canter up in your 2-point, your galloping position. You're going to walk for 3 to 4 minutes, depending on the weather. You're going to gallop for another 2.5 minutes or canter, and then you're going to hack them out. You can substitute that with the cross-country school if you want to. And then we go into our second week. So the way I set this up, obviously you may not have this exact event schedule, but I think you can get the idea. I set it up that we're going to be doing an event every 3 weeks. Okay. You can go every other weekend. Certainly you could go every weekend back to back if you had to. I don't love to do that too often, but I understand sometimes the schedules are such that you don't have a lot of options. But we'll say that next week. Now you're going to kind of be back. If you look at it now, that third week here, or 2 weeks after your first event, my dog now is bothering me on the ground. That third week is kind of like week one again, right? So, Monday's your off day. Tuesday, you do your hack and like flat, and you can see the similarities there. You've got your 12-minute trot. You get your jump school in there. The trot and the jump can be interchangeable. We've talked about that in the past. And then again, we do our 2.5-minute canter. So we've kind of, because we're not talking about getting ready for some major 3-day event, some huge fitness test. We're talking about keeping a horse sort of going at the introductory level. We're going to stay at that 2.5-minute canter, those 2.5-minute canters. And that's as much for you as the rider to be comfortable in that galloping position, in that 2-point galloping around between the jumps, as it is for your horse to be fit. So I kind of put those in at this level because I want you as a rider to be getting fitter and stronger as well. And then again, we've got our week before the event. You got to fit that travel day in there. We're staying at the 12-minute trots. And again, be conscientious of, what did I do before that first event? Did I do that trot day or did I do a flat day? And how did that affect my performance? And this is where you have to be flexible. If you did 3 days of dressage before that first event and your horse had a terrible test, you're going to be tempted to want to work more. And maybe the answer is, maybe I should try the 12-minute trot in there and do a little fitness day and take some pressure off. Or if you did it and you're like, you know what, he was wild, I needed to work him harder, then maybe that's something you'd add in that third day of dressage rather than the trot day for that event. And then we don't have to really get into week 5 and 6 because those are duplicated from week 2 and 3. But you can see the reason I put it in there is because I wanted you to see, again, how this is a program. It's set up that way. Does that make sense?
Very much so. You can see the patterns happening here. You can see what the competition weeks look like compared to the weeks before and after.
Right. So that takes us to the next level.
Let's quick wellness check, John. Do you have sunscreen on?
No.
Are you roasting?
No, it looks, I mean, it's warm because I put on my awesome Ride IQ shirt.
It is such a good shirt.
And I love the color. The pink is so good. Yeah, I love it. But I put on long sleeves because I was in the air conditioning, but now I'm outside. But I'll be fine. It's all right. Anything for you.
Okay. Well, we're here for you if we need to move locations. It's no problem.
Nope. Nope. I'm here.
Okay. I have beginner novice coming up. Awesome. Here is our beginner novice schedule. Okay.
So I'm not going to run us through it every single day by day because I think that's a bit repetitive because, again, we talk about the similarities in the programs, but you can see we've moved up the trots here to 15-minute trots. So that's what your trot day is going to be. Again, remember that jump day and your trot day are interchangeable. We've got our event there in week 1. Fit that travel day in. Remember, again, after we do the event there in week 2, you get that hack day, right? So you get a day off, like leave them alone. They do not want to see you. You get a Tuesday, just go for a nice long walk, hang out with your friends, have an awesome time, enjoy your horse, but don't pressurize them. Then you get your hack day and you get to do a little bit of light flat work, just stretch them out, make sure they're feeling awesome through their body. And again, now we're going to stay at that 15-minute trot. When we get to our canter work, we're going to be at 2 3-minute canters. And if we go back, I was trying to pull this up, but the papers keep blowing away. If we go back, I'm almost there. Sorry. It's not as organized as my desk was. We finished the beginner novice, the first program, with 3-minute canters. So that's why now we're staying at that 3-minute canter level. So we're doing 2 3-minute canters. And again, you can substitute that for cross-country schools where needed. You also could do cross-country for your jump schools in any of these, right? So you have to kind of play it out with what you and your horse need. But be smart. Don't just cross-country school. Don't just do your gallops. Interchange them a little bit at this stage, at this level. I think, again, like I was saying, when we go up the levels, we get on a 5-day a week or a 5-day gallop schedule as we go up sort of above preliminary. But at this level, I think galloping 1 day a week is perfectly acceptable. And again, it's as much for you and I as a rider to be fit and strong. I know if I haven't galloped for a while over the holidays and then I get rolling again down here in Florida in January, that first day that I get done, my legs seize up because I haven't been galloping. So it's important, if we're going to go out and we're going to compete, that we are galloping fit, even at the beginner novice level in this case. So we stay at those 3-minute canters or our cross-country schools. We get our event again there in week 4. You can see again the similarities to the other levels. 15-minute trots though. And you'll see before all of these gallops here, I have you guys just doing a 12-minute trot. The idea of that trot before your gallop is really just to loosen your horse up. So I think somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes for that gallop is totally cool. All right. I think we can probably go on to the novice one and just quick go over those numbers as well, Jessa.
Great. Yeah, the interesting thing here is you can see that it's truly maintenance. In the first workshops that you did with us, it was all building and checking in and seeing if your horse was ready to build. And now you have some consistency built in.
Right. And again, if you're getting ready to do like one of those educational 3-day events, then that's a little different deal. Then you're going to want to add to it. This is for people who are eventing a couple times a month at most, wanting to have a fun time showing through the summer or through their season, whatever that is, but not necessarily with that end CCI short or training level 3-day or novice level 3-day clinic in mind. This is purely people who want to go out and horse trial and have fun on the weekends. So you can see week 1 now at the novice level. We're on novice, right? Yeah, sorry.
Correct.
My phone's real small. And sadly, my eyes are not as good as I would hope. So
I'm right there with you.
Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing. So we're at 17-minute trots now. Okay, so at novice level, we're at somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. If you have a horse that needs a little more trot and you think he's just needs a little more fitness, that could be as much as a 20-minute trot. I don't think at novice it needs to be more than that. You see we've got our events slotted in there in the same places as week 1 and week 4. I then, on your gallop day, we do 3 3-minute canters. So we aren't galloping or cantering longer in each set, but we've added 1 additional set in now for the novice level, 3 3-minute canters. Remember, your breaks in between there are between 3 and 4 minutes. We warm up with a 15-minute trot here because that just loosens them up. It gives them a little more fitness. As always, you can do that cross-country school in there. And remember what we talked about in our last session as well about checking your horse's heart rate. So you can check in on your horse's heart rate. When you get done with the gallop set, you let them walk for maybe 15, 30 seconds, and then you halt and you watch your horse's breath. You start a stopwatch or look at your watch and count how many breaths your horse takes in 15 seconds. You multiply that number by 4, and before you start off again, you want that number to be down below 80. So if you're getting a good workout in, they should get up around that 80 number, maybe a bit above it, maybe a fair bit above it. But in the 3 to 4 minutes that your walk break happens, you should be able to get them back down below that number before you start again. I think that's a super important thing to have there. And one other thing that I think I haven't actually mentioned yet, but I think is super important, you need a watch, right? Whether that's your cross-country watch, but it needs to be a digital watch. It needs to count up or count down, however you like it. I have my trusty Casio, usually it's an Ironman, but I couldn't find one, stopwatch on, and I wear that all the time. My wife would tell you that adults wear watches And I would say that event riders who want to make sure their horses are fit wear watches. Your iPhone timer does not count. That's lame. It needs to be a watch, so that you can actually know where you're at and how hard you should be working the horses, and that you're not reaching into your pocket and pulling it out and trying to see how much time you have left. So I think that's another important thing here. A piece of this is you got to have a stopwatch.
Makes sense. And it's good practice for when you're trying to manage your time on course too. So it's not the first time you've looked at a watch.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you what, I actually was working on that with one of my students here this winter who was told not to wear a watch by her last coach, which made sense because they didn't want her chasing the clock. Mm-hmm. But I've always encouraged my students that they should wear a watch. They should be comfortable with it, because you don't want to get to that first event where it matters and have one more thing you have to learn how to do and hear that beeping and it starts to stress you out. So I think get comfortable wearing your stopwatch for sure, and know how to use it.
And with this, it's really interesting because you can look at these schedules, and I felt the same way when we were looking at the gearing up schedules, and it's like so straightforward, so clear, but then the variability starts coming to mind, like the what if questions, which are actually really helpful it's why we call these a workshop, because this isn't the one size fits all conditioning schedule. This is a template that you can adjust based on your horse and based on your schedule and yourself and what you're preparing for. One of those can I get into a what if question, or is there anything else you want to cover on this novice?
No, I think it's pretty self-explanatory here with the novice, and I think questions now make a lot of sense.
Okay, so I'll leave this up while I ask it, but a what if question that comes to mind is if you know that the show that you're going to has a lot more hills than what you have at home, and you're worried about how your horse is going to handle that, because it's more of an ask than a show that you are going to at novice level that is mostly flat, whether you've already done that this season or not. What would you be thinking as a rider, Jon, in terms of checking in on your horse or adjusting accordingly?
Okay, so I think if I'm thinking that the event is going to be more of a fitness test because of terrain, I might. The obvious things are I would try to find some place that has a little bit more terrain, maybe pop in the trailer and go to a hill. But that's not always feasible. Believe me, I know. You can certainly add a little bit of time to the gallops. I don't think for novice you should be going more than 3-4 minute canters, but you could certainly make one of those 3s into a 4. There's all kinds of stuff. You can hack more if you have time. You can take that horse out for up to an hour walk in addition to all of this work every day. But for those of us who don't have time for that, who have actual, what we'll call quote unquote real jobs, which I always try not to say because I feel like I have a real job because I'm always working. But you know what I mean? If you've got an office job and you can't be out riding all day, that may not be feasible. So I think the other piece that's super important is be mindful of how your horse feels on the day of the competition, right? Like if you've done everything according to this plan and you think your horse is fit and you get out there and you realize, gosh, I've jumped a few jumps and my horse is kind of tired. Well, then just think about, should you go slower? Should you let him trot a little bit? Should you come home and say, maybe I'll do a little more work and be ready the next time? That's all stuff you have to think about. So I think just be mindful while you're on course as well. Or maybe you say, look, okay, it's the first event of the year and this is a hilly one. I'm going to come in and be, 30 seconds slow. I remember when I was a working student, we were always told you go out that first event of the season and you should not make time. And then the second event, you go a little bit faster. And the third event, maybe you make time. And then the fourth event is usually your big event that you're kind of aiming for. And you really go for it at that one, or you kind of have to pick and choose depending on how many events you're going to do that season as to which ones you're going to go fast and which ones you're not. But I think the trick is to get them as fit as you can without pounding on them too hard.
What a great reminder that just because there's an optimum time, you still as the horse's, partner and leader get to choose how fast you're going, how much you're asking. And I mean, if I related it to like running as a human, it would make sense that, if 5Ks or 10Ks or what's on the docket, those are going to get better and speedier as you go. I think that's a great reminder. And the other thing that you said that is something that I learned through Ride IQ, I was just not really privy to it prior, is that walking is conditioning. And Lauren Spryzer did a hack chat with us on, it's called Jimmy Wofford's Walkathon, because he was talking to her about getting her dressage horses fit through walking. And I never thought of walking as a true, way to build fitness. And it turns out it is. Like you're saying that if there's something that's going to be demanding of your horse physically, walking is something that is really interesting to consider and isn't adding a whole lot of extra, wear and tear on their body.
Yeah, if you can swing it, it makes all the sense in the world. So like Florida, Ocala is not known for its hills, right? We're not in Colorado. And in the autumn, we get up into the Northeast where there are hills. And so my horses for the spring 3-day events, I don't get too worried about their fitness because they tend to be places that are flatter. But once we get into June and we're talking about Bromont, or July and we're talking about Rebecca Farm, or into the autumn when we're talking about Morven Park or Maryland, suddenly fitness becomes a very real thing. And I can't increase the hills. I've got a hill, but I can't make it bigger. So I will, with those horses that are going to those longs and going up and competing in the hills, they will absolutely go for a walk in the morning and then they will work in the afternoon. I also will add in things like the aqua tread or the pool, which again, I know a lot of people don't have access to aqua treads and pools for their horses, but the walking is a huge part of it. But just remember, that's in addition to, it's not instead of.
Yep. Okay.
Now, if it needs to be instead of because you're dealing with the soundness thing for a week, that's okay. You can stay on track, but you're not going to do just that.
Okay. So that kind of leads us into one of the questions that we got ahead of time, which is when things come up. And Alexis said, I'd love to know Jon's thought on how he adjusts his schedule when bad weather comes through. I've had several weeks off and on wet footing, and I've been replacing those rides with trail rides at the walk. Great for our horse rider relationship, but maybe not that handy for staying very fit.
Yeah. So I think it was Mark Todd said that you don't lose fitness on a horse until after like 7 or 10 days. And I don't remember exactly what the number that he thought it was, but I would say basically you can miss about a week and you're not going to be, certainly at the novice level and below, you're not going to lose so much fitness that you're going to be sunk. That said, I think if you start getting longer than that, or honestly, if it's the week of the event, you've got a problem. If it's the week and you've got some time before the event and you can get 3-4 days of work before an event and you've missed a week before that, you can probably manage it. But yeah, sometimes you have to be creative. I've certainly had to walk my way into an event before and it's not ideal. And then again, not to sort of preach on this too much, but it's come up a little bit lately. I think then when you're out on course, that's where you then have to make the right call, right? Like you do all the work you can, you make the best choices you can, and then you get out on the course and you have to say, right, did it work? And you have to assess that on the go.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm picturing somebody who's in a situation like that leading up to an event, doing some trotting at the novice or beginner novice level on the course, because that's what works for them at the moment. And that's, kind of an underrated thing maybe, but like permission to do that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, at those levels, I think that's totally acceptable. Obviously, when you're talking about getting up like to modified or preliminary, I think then if you're having to trot because your horse isn't fit, you shouldn't be there.
Yep.
But I think at intro and novice and beginner novice, that's certainly at intro and beginner novice. I don't think that's the end of the world. I think you're fine as long as the horse is jumping well and you're just taking it easy here or there. I think that's probably acceptable.
So not to drill too far into this question, but the follow-up was some wind. The follow-up was from April. She said she has the same question, but she's running training level, and she said she has access to hills, so they've been doing 45 to 60 minutes of walking consistently, but outside of that, the work hasn't been able to be, it hasn't been able to be these other types of work that you're mentioning. How do you think about that at training level, and at what point do you say we're going to skip the next event?
I feel like you need to have, before a training level event, at least one gallop, I would think, or cross country school, and it needs to go well. I'm not an advocate for saying, you can just you're on a fit horse and now you've had, you sort of went through that first bit of preparation work, and then you miss 3 weeks and you've just been walking and you haven't galloped in 3 weeks. I think you need to be able to do something in there, at least have a gallop and a couple jump schools before you want to go to the event. I guess it's kind of hard, right? Because I'd say you have to use common sense there. Like, if you haven't been able to do anything but walk up and down hills for 45 minutes, your horse could be very fit from doing that, but is it going to be the right kind of fitness, right? It's like, if I go to the gym, I can be super fit, but then when I get on a horse, if I haven't ridden a horse, so if I go away to, I went away to Jamaica in December. I went away to Jamaica in December. I worked out every day, but when I came home and I rode, I was sore, right? And so I think you have to a little bit think about, you probably need a week to 10 days of work in there. Now, that might be mixed in with some rainy walk days, right? Like, maybe you've had 2 weeks of rain on and off, and you can get 4 or 5 days of real work in there mixed in with the walk days. I think that's probably acceptable. But at some point you may have to say, right, how can I find myself a ring to go work in? If you're getting all the rain and you can still get some work in a ring, and you just can't go out and do the trots and canters, you also can do the trot and canter work in the ring.
So fun. We love going around and around and around. But
AIDS podcast in your ears and listen to that.
That's right. Or I hear the Jon and Rick show is a great show.
That's a great show as well. You're right.
All right. Next question is from Jocelyn. She said, I would love some tips and tricks for managing the heat for horses and humans. We do a lot of early morning rides and preemptive hosing for both, but it's still a challenge to keep up once we transition into the really hot days. And Jon, coming from Florida, I know you know all about this.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, start early for sure. You got to start early on fitness days. So we're really lucky. We've got the covered school here. And so we do a lot of work in there, but on the fitness days, as we just alluded to, it's not super fun to be stuck in an indoor. So we start early, and if you have multiple horses, break them up over different days. So that schedule might change a little bit if you have multiple horses between each horse, so that you're not doing 4 sets of horses. You're doing 1 or 2 sets and then doing the other horses the next day. But let's say we've got 1 horse and you're just in the hottest place on earth, Ocala, Florida, in August. Couple things. I think, one, try to find someplace shady to do your warm-up work, right? Don't worry about the hills for the hacking. Don't worry about the hills for the even the trotting, quite honestly. If it's super, super hot, shorten up that warm-up trot if you're going to be doing your canter work, right? Because the idea is to warm them up, not exhaust them for that. And then do your work. But then think about this. This was sort of an embarrassing epiphany I had several years ago, where I thought, we always get taught when we live up north, because a lot of the sport is based in England, right? And in northern states is where sort of all these guys were when they came up with the initial sort of idea of fitness. We were always taught, after you work, go for that really long hack. And you guys have heard me even say, before you work, go for that really long hack. But if it's 100 degrees outside, or even 85, maybe that warm-up hack isn't 20 minutes like I like it to be. Maybe it's 10, so that your horse isn't getting hotter. Hit it with some ice water, right? Go for your hack, hit it with some ice water like you would before cross country, like when you warm up at an event, especially back when we had roads and tracks and things were right. you would get your horse with ice water before you go out on cross country. So have a little station set up, hit your horse with that ice water, go do a gallop, hit your horse with some more water, go do your next gallop. Like, have it set up on those hot days so you can get them with ice water in between. And then, this was the earth-shattering thing for me. When you're done galloping, get off and hose your horse off and hand walk them, right? That's what we do at an event. When you finish cross country at an event, you don't walk out for 20 minutes. You get off and you take your tack off and you cool your horse off. So if it's hot, do that.
For the ice water system, that's sponge and bucket. And are you sponging specific parts of the horse or everything that's not tacked?
I mean, basically everything that's not tacked. You want to get their neck, their chest, all their major sweat areas up on their croup, between their hind legs. And I don't want to hear any of you say, I cannot lift a 5-gallon bucket full of ice water, because that's terribly pathetic, and you can totally do it. You can lift a 5-gallon bucket of ice water. Jen can do it, and she's just a girl. So
Jen,
you guys can do it. So do it properly. Don't set the bucket on the ground and then take the sponge over and then sponge them, then walk back over. Carry the bucket with you. Be tough. Be a woman. Be a man.
Jon,
be strong.
With John's perspective being Jen, the strongest, feistiest woman out there, we're all going to have to raise the bar for ourselves.
Yeah, you can do it, right? And if you can't lift a 5-gallon bucket, lift like a smaller bucket, but have the bucket with you so that you're getting the most ice cold water you can on your horse as quickly and efficiently as you can.
Got it. And then just wanted to double click on, you mentioned looking at this kind of Sunday schedule, you have the trot and then you have the canter sets. The trot is something that you could maybe pull some minutes from so that you make sure that canter gets done, those canters.
Yes. Again, just remember, like, the trot is to loosen them up on that day. It is not to, I mean, there's a little bit of fitness to it for sure, but it's really more about loosening them up so that they're ready to canter. So you can adjust that as needed. And again, like, let's say you have a big field you're doing your gallops in, but you've got an indoor ring that's cooler. Do your trot in your indoor ring.
Cool.
Then hit your horse with the hose and then go out and do the gallop in the grass and then come back into the indoor ring for your break in between and then go back out again.
Great. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Next question is from our friend Jacqueline Burke, who you know
her very well. Hi, Jacqueline.
She had some really good questions. Let's start with a basic one. How often are the novice or training level horses doing an event?
So that's a good question. Like, I think that's a hard one to answer. Like, mine are doing an event in the winter season. They could be doing one every other weekend for a little while, but they're kind of sporadic because I'm fitting them in with all of my other horses. Now, when I lived in Milwaukee, our season started in, when I would live there, it probably started in May and it ended in October. So I was doing 2 events a month, May, June, July, August, September. I was doing two events a month, probably for 4 or 5 months straight. Maybe missing some time here or there. And I think you got to feel your horse out. And remember, like, it doesn't matter what level they're going at. You also want to make sure you're picking out good events with good grounds, that you're not pounding the heck out of them and making them sore from that.
So a novice training level horse, we'd feel comfortable doing an every other week event, a competition. But this is probably where there is some differentiation between the modified and preliminary horses. Are those, like, would it be more ideal to have like an every third week? And not that anyone's schedule is going to be this consistent, but just so we understand kind of like what the ideal cadence would be at these different levels. At modified or preliminary, is that what you would be looking at, more of a, week at home event, week at home?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I guess what I would say to answer both of those questions better, I would like to compete them every 3 weeks at all levels.
Okay.
So I've got Pretzel, right? My novice horse. He's done since January. He's going to his 3rd event now. He's not been eventing a lot. I've been doing a lot of stuff at home, but that's because I'm cheap. and I can do a lot of stuff here with him, and I'm not in a rush to get him out and get him going. I want him to sort of have a nice progression and enjoy himself and not feel like he's getting trucked all over the world. So I'm probably a little more conservative with how often I run them, but I understand as well that some people are going to say to me, look, I've got like a 12-week season where I live up here in the north and I got to hit it hard. So I think every 2 weeks is totally doable for those horses for a short season like that. I think if you're talking, like here in Florida, we can have a 12-month season if we wanted. So, like I said, Pretzel didn't really do more than 3 recognized events. He did a couple schooling things since January, and that's a good schedule for him. But I think every 3 weeks is really pretty ideal, because then you can have that light week after the event. You're not rushing them back into work, and then you can sort of prep them up that 3rd week and be ready to go.
Okay, that is a great rule of thumb as people are kind of planning things out and aiming for the ideal. Knowing that competitions are not always going to fit your ideal.
Yeah, and I think one other thing I would just say to that is, as you get going into the season, what I find really helpful to do sometimes is go to the US Eventing website and pull up my horse's record and look back at how many events have I done on this horse. Like, it's an easy thing to forget because we just get rolling, right? And then they all sort of blend together. And I remember several years going back and looking, and I'm like, I feel like I had a good season. How many events did this horse do? And then I look, I'm like, wow, he did, 10 events this season. He's good. He's done for the year. You need to just double check on that every once in a while.
Okay. Another question from Jacqueline. This one made me really think when she sent it in. And I had no answer, of course, but I was like, glad she asked it. She said, let's say you have something like 6 to 8 weeks between events. Are you still doing your canter day every week? And then there's another follow-up, but I'll let you kind of answer if there's that big of a spread.
No, I'm not. I'm probably giving them a couple weeks off, figuring, like, if I'm talking, look, to be honest, sometimes my novice horses don't gallop, guys. This schedule is set up because I want you as a rider to have something to do, to make sure that you're fit and strong and ready to go. So sometimes my novice horses I'll take to an event and I've just cross-country schooled them. I've made the fitness sort of fit into the schooling part of the program. I think for discipline for the riders at that level, it's very important to do it. But if the horses are schooling properly, getting good cross-country schools and everywhere, you can use that as your fitness work. But if I have 6 weeks off, I probably would not gallop for at least 3 weeks after that event. I would keep them working. I would be jumping and flatting and cross-countrying here and there. But no, I'd probably let them recover, and then I would do 2 to 3 weeks of fitting in those gallops for the discipline of it, for the fitness of it for myself as a rider, so that I'm ready to go. And again, like, I think it's a good thing to do, and I actually do it more now with the young horses than I probably used to sort of say, like, let's get out and have a little canter around.
Cool. And that's something that we talked about at the outset of these workshops too, is how, a number of members came to us and said, what I hear from my coach is, at intro level or beginner novice level, I don't need any sort of like a conditioning schedule to be going to the events, but people want the schedule so that they can develop the habit and kind of develop the understanding of how these consistent programs work to prepare a horse. So that clearly carries over to these maintenance schedules. The other question that Jacqueline had is, if you have one of those long spreads in your season, does the horse ever get an extended break? So we have this 1-day break built into all of these schedules, but would you mid-season be like, just, you can stay in the field for a week?
Yeah, absolutely. I would. So I would weigh that out, see how and it's not just like soundness. Sometimes it's mental soundness of the horse as well. Like, again, just thinking of what I've got in my barn, I've got Pretzel, right? And so he's going to go do Chattahoochee this weekend. Bucart, I think it's now. Bucart Horse Trials. And he will get a couple days off next week because he's been going pretty steady all winter long. And so he'll get a little break, maybe more than, well, that's a lot. He'll get a couple days next week, because then we've got Ocala in June, and then I'll probably give him a week or two of nothing, so he can just chill and hang out. Because that's sort of something I do with all of the CCI horses. Like, they're all the ones that did all their longs this spring. Most of them are still on break. Some of them have just started walking under tack now, sort of 3 to 4 weeks after those events are over. So yes, I would for sure fit in a break, give the horses off, let them go out and be horses for a bit. It's so easy in this country to go, and all of a sudden you look and you're like, wow, I've had this horse up. I remember, gosh, probably 10 years ago, I had a young horse, and it was going great. And I'd had it for about a year and a half, 2 years. And I suddenly realized he'd been in work, 6 days a week work. He'd miss a week here, a week there. But basically for a year and a half, I never gave him more than a couple days off in a row, because I was producing the horse. I'm producing this horse. I'm going to make him do his thing. And you have to sometimes just step back and be like, wait a minute, like, was that the right thing to do for the horse? And I don't think it is. I think they need those breaks.
It's another thing I learned from Ride IQ, because it really does. I mean, like you're saying, it does seem like if you're driven and committed, you're on the horse, you're working the horse, and that's where the progress happens. But we've heard over and over through conversations like this how beneficial the break is, especially just for the horses, not only body, but mind, because they've earned it. Burnout is for horses too.
Yep. They need to go out and be horses. And the thing is, like, up in the north or in England, it gets forced on them. It's like in England, a lot of those guys do not have indoor riding rings, right? They don't have anywhere to go inside. So when winter hits, those horses get turfed out, and at most they go hack out on the roads and get ready to go for when the weather changes in sort of end of March, April time. And so then that season sort of gets forced on them to give them a break.
One of our Ride IQ coaches is Megan Murnovich-Burdick, who Jon has also coached, and she went to university over in England with her horse Ulrich at the time, Hartpury College, I believe it is. And if you search Megan's name in the app, I can't remember what episode it is, but she talked about this as well, and just how different the approach is there, and how it really made her kind of reconsider the approach here, which is interesting to have both of those perspectives.
Ulrich, the flying pig.
The flying pig, yes. So yeah. If you're listening, he's called the flying pig just because his jumping style was so funny. He was the coolest tricaner. And Megan let me do my very first training level on Ulrich, and it was like the biggest gift ever, because this horse literally flew. It had wings on him.
He was
so
awesome.
That was very cool. Okay, so the other question that Jacqueline had was about how trotting looks as the season progresses, which you've shown us that it can look very consistent. She's curious how that changes for a modified or a preliminary level. Do you just kind of up the durations on your trot set days and on your canter set days?
So I would say, like, for a modified horse, I'd probably be doing 20-minute trot sets midweek. Down here in the summer, I still probably wouldn't do my warm-up trot before my gallop longer than 15 minutes because it's so hot. So keep that in mind when I say that. It's because it's hot in Ocala in July. For preliminary, I'm doing 25-minute trots. But again, if I've got a big clunking warm blood horse that needs more trotting to sort of get the fitness right, I will do that. I would trot them longer. I don't think you're going to really hurt a horse by trotting it, as long as the ground's not super hard. But yeah, I think 20 minutes for a modified, 25 for a preliminary horse. I still would stay at that 15 minutes of trot for my warm up before my gallops. I'd say the canters for a modified horse, you'd be certainly making those a little bit longer. I'd probably be doing 4 or 5 minute canters and 5 or 6 minute canters for a preliminary horse. But again, like where Jacqueline is, I've seen her cross country field. She's got an awesome hill, so she could probably shorten those up.
Okay, super helpful to know. And The other thing I want to circle back to is you mentioned after an FEI event, your horses get a break, which I'm guessing is like a week or so. You can correct me, but are you doing something similar for a horse trial at, let's say, like, if a horse runs preliminary, are they getting some extended time off after the competition as well? Or is that just for those FEI length events?
I'm going to blow your mind. So my horses that ran Ocala, Zelda did the 2-star, and she just started walking last week. So I think she actually had 2 weeks off, which I would say is very short. She will walk for probably 3 to 4 weeks before she ever even picks up trot and just keep hacking. Because I don't intend to actually take her to a competition to event until August. So she'll be doing some jumper stuff. She'll be doing some dressage stuff, but she's not going to event until August because I plan to aim her at another long, or maybe moving up to intermediate. We'll see at the end of the season, sort of October or November. And that, if we do the math, means if I were just to keep her in work and just give her a week off, let's say, she would be January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, 11 months straight if I didn't give her that time off. So I don't event in July ever. I refuse to event in July because it's horrible everywhere except the northwestern United States. I just find the ground is hard and the weather is hot. If you get up into the Northwest, the ground up there can be quite good and the weather can be nice, but it's hot. It's tough. So my horses get that time off, but I have the luxury that I can event in January, if you want to call eventing in January a luxury. So they will get an extended period of time off. My horse trial horses will as well. So the ones that are going to go event here in Ocala in June, they will get at least 2 weeks off, the horse trial horses, after that event, and they will not be sat on until sometime in July to then be ready to go event mid-August.
Are those pretty much their off-season breaks versus?
Yes. Yeah. So they'll get their off-season break because of the way the season works here in Florida. They'll get basically a short summer break like that. Zelda's being a little bit longer. The ones that did that April event being a little bit longer, that might be their long break. And then again, come around Thanksgiving time, sort of through early part of December, they get another month or so off there. I think it's just better for them mentally. And it sort of works out that way naturally for us because, like I said, July's pretty hot everywhere. And I'll be honest with you guys, I like to go up and go water skiing and have some fun in July. And then December and end of November is holiday time and it's family time. So the horses get some light time then as well. And then we're ready to go in January. But I think you have to adapt that into what your schedule is, right? Like if your season is 4 months in the middle of the summer, then your break is going to be a different time than mine. But the horses need a mental break.
Okay. So that helps us get our head around like when these real vacations happen to, beat burnout and let them come down. What about during the season when you have a 2-star or a preliminary horse trial, something like that? Right now, like the schedules we've looked at, obviously we're not talking about 2-stars or preliminary, but they've shown just that day off and then a light day of walking. Are you ever giving like 4 days or a week off once you get to a certain level of horse trial or because they've done an FEI event?
So I will sometimes after an event. So if we talk about what Jacqueline was saying, where I've got 6 weeks, yeah, I might give them 4 or 5 days off somewhere in there and be like, look, you've had a pretty long season. We've got a long break here. Take a little time. Absolutely. If we're talking about we've got an event in 3, 4, 5 weeks, then, well, maybe not 5, but 3 or 4 weeks, then I might say I'm going to give this horse 2 days off, 3 days off, and then put it back to work. I think that's totally reasonable. And you just, again, have to sort of weigh out what does this horse need? And be careful it's not what do you want this horse to need? Like, I've seen both sides of it where I have some students who are like, oh, my horse doesn't ever want a day off. And I'm thinking, does your horse not want a day off or do you not want a day off? And I've also seen the other side of it where they say, oh, you know, he worked really hard last week. He worked 3 days. I think I'm going to give him a week off. So just be real about what is that horse telling you.
That's pretty funny. Yes, that makes complete sense. And I just saw the clock strike an hour, and that was our final question that we got in ahead of time. So I think that we covered these bases really well, and I'm positive we'll hear from the FEI competitors or the classic format event competitors, and we'll see if there's demand to cover that topic. But now, like, I don't know if we're going to cut my monologue from earlier, but I'll just reiterate it. All 3 of these sessions, workshops that Jon has done with us on conditioning have all been adding on top of each other. So they're not, if you haven't listened to those first 2 yet, regardless of the level that you're at, I'd really recommend listening to both of those because there was new insight in both of them. And then this one as well. And then just let us know how you're feeling about your conditioning and how your conditioning is going. And we can all kind of collectively take it from there.
Yeah, and I'm happy to do more of this if there's people who want to do it. If you feel like you got it, then we can move on to something else. But it's really what you guys want to do here, and I appreciate you letting me do it. I apologize again about my internet. I'm going to try to get that sorted out before the next one.
No apologies necessary. This has been just very I just feel for you because you've been on your phone in your yard making it work, and you managed to make it work so we could hear you and see you the whole time, and that's awesome. It still happened, and you've got multiple pups along for the ride with you. All right. Well, Jon, thank you so much. It's been really fun doing these, and we'll see you soon on another Ask an Expert, whether it's about conditioning or not, to be determined. And we'll be cheering for you at the event.